Blat Gemara. Today's Blat is Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. Let me give you a quick recap of what we did so far. We had a Mishnah, and the two cases of the Mishnah that seem to be contradictory. First case of the Mishnah is where after they got engaged, it turned out to be that she had certain defects. That the question is, when did these defects happen? If they happened before they even got engaged, and she didn't inform him, then he is this engagement should be dissolved. It's a mekartos, the whole thing. And if it happened after they got engaged, then the stach for sedeu, his field got flooded, and he's stuck with it. There's nothing you can do about it. If he divorces her, he has to pay her out the full ksula. So in the Mishnah, we had two cases. The first case was where it happened while she was still home with her parents, and there we say we don't believe her, if she wants to have a ksula, if she claims that it happened after they got engaged, the onus of proof is on them. In the second part of the Mishnah, we learned that if she already moved into her husband's house and they were just engaged, then we believe her that it happened after they got engaged, and he has to prove that it happened before. Otherwise, he has to pay out the ksula. And we can't understand how this is working. So we explained, Rabbi Loza says, the first part of the Mishnah follows Rabbi Yeshua, who says that if he has a cheskas mammon trumps the cheskas aguf. In other words, cheskas aguf says that since, definitely whatever the changes there are to her body happen as late as possible. In other words, it happened after they got engaged, which is Rabbi Gamliel's opinion that cheskas aguf is dominant. But Rabbi Yeshua says no. Cheskas aguf is not strong enough to take out a cheskas mammon. Right now, the money is sitting with the husband. You want him to pay out, so you are being the moitzi, and cheskas aguf doesn't do it. So we said that the first part of the Mishnah follows Rabbi Yeshua, that cheskas mammon is stronger, and therefore the onus of proof is on the woman and the husband and the father. And the second part of the Mishnah follows Rabbi Gamliel, who says that no, that cheskas haguf is stronger, and therefore the husband has to prove when it happened. Otherwise, he has to pay out. So that's how Rabbi Loza learned the Mishnah. Then we had Rava, and Rava said no. It's all Rabbi Gamliel. The cheskas haguf is stronger, but depends where you discovered it. Did it happen while she was in the husband's house, or did it happen while she was still at home in her father? And that is why, because there's another principle that sort of undermines the whole cheskas haguf, and that is the principle of kan nimtza kan hoya. If you found something right now, you think it happened right now, it probably was there always. So if you in her father's house, if we found a mum, we'll say it probably was there a long time ago. Probably was there before they got engaged. Even though the cheskas haguf that says one way, the kan nimtza kan hoya demolishes that principle, and therefore they want to collect the ksuva. The onus of proof is on them. But once she moves into her husband's house, then the earliest that she was there, it was still after the engagement. So kan nimtza kan hoya still says it happened after the engagement, and therefore the husband is stuck. If he wants to say that it happened before the prior to the engagement, he needs to prove it. Okay? And then we have Rav Ashi, who has a whole different pshat. So now the Gemara continues. Shmuel said something, and he compares it to our Mishnah, and we're going to try to understand how it compares to our Mishnah. So after Vayin Vav Amud 6, the two dots. Omer Rav Shmuel, famous Gemara, Machlif Parah b'Chamoir. What happened is we have Chalipin. So you have two people, Reuven and Shimon. We'll call one the Baal HaParah, the owner of the bull, and the other one is the owner of the donkey. And Hamachlif Parah b'Chamoir. So they made a Chalipin, that is, that I'll exchange, I'll swap the bull for the cow for the donkey. And as soon as one of them makes a kinyan, the other one automatically owns the other item. And then we have a number of cases in the Gemara. Here the case is going to be that the owner of the donkey made a meshicha, he pulled the bull, so he was kind of the bull, and automatically the donkey now belongs to the owner of the bull. The problem is that the animal died sometime, and when the question is, when did it die? Prior to the kinyan, so the whole kinyan never happened. That was before the owner of the donkey took the bull. The donkey was already dead. So then the owner of the bull said, "Hey, give me back my bull, give me back my cow." Or it happened after the kinyan, and then too bad. Once you became the owner of the donkey, it died. Right? So that's the question. We had other Gemaras in Baba Kamba where if they found a baby next to it, who gets to own the baby? The owner of the cow. Each one claims it happened, when I was the owner. Anyway, they swapped. So the owner of the chamoida made a meshicha on the paras. As far as we can view it right now, he is now the muhzik. He's holding on to the paras in his possession. And and the owner of the parah did not bring the chamor to his house, so the chamor is already dead. Not that he needs to bring it into his house for a kinyan; it's automatically his. But by the time he went to pick up the chamor, he found it dead. The question is, when did it die? When did it die? Did it die before the kinyan of the parah? So then There's no kinyan ever happened because the chamor is dead already. If it died afterwards, too bad. So now we would think the owner of the donkey, the one who's holding on to the parah now, he is the muhzik. The one who's trying to take. Who is the mitzvah? Who is the mitzvah? No, he has it already. It has already. The owner of the cow who's now taking the chamor, he wants his money back. So he is the mitzvah. That's how we understand it right now. He's the mitzvah. So al bala chamor lahavi raya, the owner of the donkey has to bring a raya. Shahaya chamor kayim b'shas mashiach as a part of. Nevertheless, we say that the one who is machzik is the one. Usually we say the one who's machzik has a cheskes mama, we trust him. Not here. Here we say the one who's machzik, the one who's holding on to the cow, has to prove that his donkey was still alive when he took the cow. Otherwise, it falls apart. Now this is a big chiddush because usually it's the mitzi has to bring a proof, and here you tell me the machzik, the one who's holding on to the cow, has to prove it. Yeah, because if the donkey was not the validity, yeah, because it's a swap, and the only reason why I'm getting the cow is because you're getting the donkey. But if the donkey was already dead, I'm not giving you anything, then I don't have a cow. The Tana Tuna Kala, and I have a Tana that supports me, the Mishnah of Kala, which is the Mishnah we just learned yesterday. So now the question is, which part of the Mishnah supports him that the Machzik is the one that has to bring the proof? I Kala, which part of the Mishnah? Which part of the Mishnah? Ile Makala, basically, we're talking about the first part of the Mishnah where the Kala is still sitting in the father's house, right? And the dindir is that the father has to bring a proof. And we're going to learn that the reason that the first part of the Mishnah, we're going to follow Rabbi Elazar's view, that the first part of the Mishnah is written by one Tana and the second part of the Mishnah is written by another Tana. The first part of the Mishnah is written by Rabbi Shua, that Cheskes Mammon trumps everything. Everything Cheskes Mammon. Yeah, therefore, so even if she was, according to that, even if she was in the husband's house already, even if she already entered the husband's house already, after the chuppah and everything else, nevertheless, and nevertheless, the father has to bring a proof as to when it happened. So therefore, what do we see? That even though that the father now is the muhzik, the father of the muhzik is already married and everything else, still he has to prove when it happened. So same thing here. Even though that the owner of the donkey is holding on to the potter, he is a muhzik. Nevertheless, he has to prove that it's his, that he has a right to have it. Says the Gemara, Midomi, what are you comparing? There it's not really a machzik. The father, who has the money? What do you want? You want the ksuva money. The ksuva money is sitting in the bank account of the husband. So I don't care if it happened while it was in the father's house. I don't care if it happened while it was the husband's house. The fact is, the father is the mitzi. Okay, a mitzi has to prove. But in the case of Shmuel's case, his chiddush is that who is he saying that has to bring the proof? The one who's holding the potter, the machzik. Where do you find a priest for that? Here, you want the balachamay to bring an ayah. He's the machzik. You're right. It's from the second part of the Mishnah. It's the second part where we follow Gamliel. Gamliel says that we don't care about cheskes mammon. All we care about is cheskes aguf. And we say that probably the changes happen after the engagement. Therefore, probably we believe her. And if your husband wants to say that I don't have to pay, he has to bring a proof. And therefore, according to this, it doesn't matter really if it happened while in the father's house. It doesn't matter what happened in the woman's house. We believe the woman. We completely believe the woman. And the husband has to prove. Now, the husband is a muhzik in the money, and yet he has to prove that the money's his. So here you have a perfect example to Shmuel. He's the machzik, right? The husband has the money in his bank account, and yet he's the one who has to prove that he doesn't owe the money. So that's exactly the case over here. Says you want to know? You can't compare. Over there, according to Gamliel, what's the whole strength of the father? Cheskes haguf, right? That's the whole strength. And over here, yeah. So there, what's the husband has to do? He has to destroy the I guess this chazaka of the father, right? He has to bring witnesses that no, they saw this boom by her beforehand. Otherwise, the father has so the chazaka is opposing the cheskes mammon of the husband. So there we say, look, the chazaka, even though you have a cheskes mammon, there's a very strong chazaka against it. And what do we want from the husband? Demolish that person's chazaka, the cheskes aguf. So therefore, we say to the husband, you bring a proof. But over here, the Balachmar, not only is he holding on to the para, but what does the Cheskes Haguf say here? That any changes in the donkey, the donkey died, probably happened just now. So very recently, because Cheskes Haguf says any changes happen as late as possible. So here the Chazak is supporting the machzik. Here the owner of the donkey is holding on to the cow. First of all, he's a machzik. He's holding on to the cow. Second of all, the Chazaka says that probably the donkey was alive when he took the cow. It only died afterwards. So in that case, who said he has to bring any proof? Don't bring me knife. The mission is a different case altogether. The Chazaka is supporting him. So how do you know Shmuel to say that the owner of the donkey who happens to be holding on to the cow has to bring proof? Says, I'll tell you what Pshat here is. You think we're focusing on the Kesuva, and that's what Shmuel meant. No, there's two things happening in our Mishnah. If you say that the marriage dissolves and there's no Kesuva to the woman, plus any money that changed hands for the Kedushin has to go back to the owner. And that's what we're fighting about. So who's the muhzik here? You assume the muhzik is the husband because he's holding on to the Kesuva money. We're talking about the other focus, which is the Kedushin money, and the muhzik is the father. And therefore, we're bringing a proof in the first part of the Mishnah. We tell the father, you bring a raya, and the raya is what? That you can continue holding on to Kedushin money. You want to be a machzik. And the Chazak is support, so you have a chesed supporting you, and yet the first part of the Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yeshua, says, no, too bad. You, father, have to bring a raya because chesked's mom and trumps it. So here it's perfect. You're a muhzik. The father's a muhzik. He's holding on to Kedusha money. He has a chazaka that says it probably happened later. And yet we're saying, father, you bring a raya to support your cheskes mama. Exactly Shmuel's case. Now there's a machlekes we're going to have in the Gemara Babasa. What happens if you give a ring, there's Kedushin money, but you never make it to the marriage? Let's say she passes away. Does the Kedushin money go back to the chassan or not? Or do we say he gave it to her wholeheartedly, whether continuous marriage or not? Or no, the whole thing was on the pretext that we're going to get married, but now it's not happening. I want my money back. So he said, "Well, you don't have to say a liba demand on the kedushin lablis. We need the one who said that the husband can no longer keep it; you have to give it back. The one who said that kedushin tibui means sunk in; it stays forever. Yeah, it stays there forever. Even so the father now is just trying to prove that he has a cheskes moment because he's allowed to keep it. So the question is, if the din is the father can keep it, why taka does he have to return? You know why? Hani mili kedusha vaday. If the kedushin is 100%, but then they change their mind or something happened or she died, okay. So then the din is the kedushin stays. Our kedusha died. The question here is whether it was kedushin. In other words, if the mum was there before and she didn't tell him, then the whole thing was exactly. So then, so this is what Shmuel's proof is. So anyway, Meshach asked a question. We have in the Gemara Chulin that different treifas, and one of them is a thing called the Beis HaKoises, 4 stomachs in an animal, and one of the stomachs is that there's like cups, shaped like cups, and the food goes in there, and then it begins to digest it, and then it turns into cuds, and that it chooses cuds and so on. It goes back and forth. So what happens? You find it's a very thick, it's like a doubled over skin. So if you find a needle, a prick in there, only on one side internal, but you don't find a hole on the opposite side, we say it's not treif, it never went through and through. If you find a hole through and through, that's all time is treif. So you found the needle in the thickness of these Beis HaKoises in the stomach. You only found a puncture on one side, shada. It's kosher, mishtei dodne, on both sides, treifa. What about nimtzoleh koyde dam? You found a spot of blood, but if you found a trickle of blood, it must have happened while the animal is still alive, so it's treif. Because but if you find the needle through and through, but no blood, I mean, it tells clearly that the needle only went through and through after the animal died, which doesn't make it treif. Because when it's dead, the blood doesn't flow anymore. Only once alive. What about huglit piyamaka? This is in moments. You bought the animal, turned out to be that it's treif. Can you get your money back? So huglit piyamaka, the congeal, then it takes a few days, shloisha, yamim, kaidim, shchitin, but it had to be 3 days prior. It takes at least 3 days for it to form, the scat. And therefore, we're going to say that it was already treif before you bought it, and he sold you a treif animal. Get your money back. Like huglit piyamaka, but if it didn't happen, you bought it in the last few days, you don't see it didn't congeal, then you don't know. You don't know if it happened yesterday or 2 days ago, so you can't get your money back. You, the buyer, so the buyer is the mitzi. The buyer is the mitzi. We'll see in a minute, and the seller is the machzik. No, as a buyer I want my money back. If the buyer, the tabach is the sheikh who's buying it. If the buyer wants get paid for the animal, so where's the money sitting right now? By the meicher. The meicher is the muchzik; he's holding on the money. The buyer is the mitzi; he wants his money back. And l'choyde boy lasuyrayo mapik. And the din is that the buyer has. It says all the buyer says the mitzi. Now we think who's the mitzi? The buyer generally gives money, so who's the mitzi? The mitzi is the buyer. And we're saying who has to bring a raya? The buyer has to bring a raya, the mitzi. Now the question is, why you Shmuel say that even the machzik, if the machzik is questionable, whether he had a right to hold the money in the first place, the meicher should be bringing a raya. Just like the case of the Bala Chamor, even though he's holding on to the potter right now, we say you bring a raya that you have a right to hold on to the potter. So we should say to the seller of the animal, just because you're holding on to the money, that's questionable whether you had a right to this money in the first place. So therefore, you, the seller, should prove that the animal was not treif. Is according to your logic, Shmuel. Let the owner of the animal bring a proof. The noikim and hold on to the money. Not that and the Gemara, we're talking about a case here, but the loyoy tafchadavi. All the bride says the word mighty. Who's the mighty? We're talking about here that the buyer did not pay any money, and therefore it's the moicha now who's the mighty, and he wants his money back. And we're saying the moicha you. So here you can't tell the buyer you prove because the buyer has a right to the money. The money's the buyer. If the moicha says, "Give me back my," no, the moicha says, "You pay me for the animal." And the din is that you the meicher prove that the animal was not treif at the time. Yeah, but who's the machzik here? The buyer. But the buyer has a right to his kesef. There's no question on his kesef. He had a right to kesef. Question is whether he owes money now or not. So when it says all the price is mighty, you thought the mighty is the buyer. He probably paid for it. You say no, the buyer didn't pay for it, and therefore the mighty is the seller. So you what? My pascha. How do you know that that's how it always is? That there's no money change. Always says mighty, which means the both sides. So the chayil includes also, and most times you would think people actually pay before they take an animal. And you're telling me now that Moitzi does not include that case. They don't talk about a case. He's only talking about a case of a Moicher that the guy didn't pay. My pascha, why be such an unequivocal? That the bride should have spelled it out. We had this a few times already. Rabbi Yehuda had a brother. Cheskel had two sons, Rabbi Yehuda and Rami. And Rami seems to three or four times. Rabbi actually said 4 times in Shas. He says, "Don't listen to what my brother says. He doesn't know what he's talking about." Now, Rabbi Yehuda is one of the most prolific authors in the Gemara. After Bai Barava comes Rabbi Yehuda, because he quotes constantly Rav and Shmuel, and plus his own thing. Rami by Yecheskel, do not listen to a word. Lahadi Klali the Kyle Yehuda Achi Bashmei the Shmuel. Don't listen to a word that my brother says in name for Shmuel. Only brothers can say that. Hachi Amar Shmuel. The older brother, probably. Hachi Amar Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. Obviously, he lived somewhere else. He must live next to Shmuel. I'm making sure every time it's Kiyasi. He also learned by Shmuel. Must be, yeah. He said, of course, he's quoting Shmuel right now. He totally misunderstood Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. Nothing to do with Maitzi and Machzik. Shmuel said, wherever the suffix was born, that's the only one who has to bring a proof. Since this guy now is holding the parah, and now there's a suffix. He created the doubt. Right now, while you had the parah, you know what happened with the chamor? The chamor didn't enter yet the other person's rishus. By the time it got to the other person, the animal was dead already. If the animal came alive to the other person, then the suffix, whatever would have happened, would have been the other person. But the donkey never left your place. It never got to the other person. So the suffix happened by you. So by you bring a proof. The Tanatona kala. And look at the kala. Because I learned like the second opinion, Rava. And Rava basically says it's all Rav Gamliel, but depends where the suffix started. If the suffix started in the father's house, the father has to prove when it happened. If the suffix started in the husband's house, the husband has to prove when it happened. That's all it is. So yeah, that's the same question. May say in the case of the seller and the buyer. So my question is opposite. If the guy did not pay money, he took the animal on credit, and the bride says the moitzi has to take the moitzi, which is the seller. The suffix started where? In the butcher's house, in the buyer's house, when he shechted the animal. So the buyer should prove when the treif was. Why does it say that if he didn't give any money, the vendor has to prove? Baal behema by the mapping and get his and take out. Yeah. So that's a din. Whoever the mitzi is has to bring, which means in this case, if the buyer didn't pay any money, then the vendor is the mitzi. He wants his money and he has to prove it. But where did the suffix start? In the house of the butcher, in the house of the buyer. And according to you, Rabbi Yecheskel, wherever the suffix started, they the one has to prove, that they're right. When I answer to you of tabach dami, from a case where the buyer actually paid the money, and therefore who is the mitzi? The buyer is the mitzi. And the suffix started by him. Perfect. So the suffix started in the buyer's house. He is the mitzi. He has to prove. Says the Gemara, my pascha. How do you know every case the buyer pays money? What about a case where the buyer didn't pay the money? Then the moich is the mitzi. The Braisa seems to say unequivocally, whoever the mitzi is has to swear. Says the Gemara, no. Stam and Milsa, in all probability, who gives the whole animal before you pay? Precisely for this reason. What if something goes wrong with the shchita? You're not gonna want to pay. He wants his money up front. And therefore, when the Braisa states of the statement that the buyer
assume that the buyer is the mitzi.
Exactly. In all cases, the buyer is a mitzi. Says the Mishnah further. Say, when do we say that this whole thing that the marriage dissolves if that the husband had no clue? But if it's mumin that was visible, then he obviously was aware and he accepted it.
It's something you should say. If it was moving the face,
but I was saying nothing. You knew about it. If it was on her face, you knew about it. So what are you going to say now? Says the Gemara. Then we should conclude the bathhouse. If there was a bathhouse, then definitely you found out you would have sent relatives to check her out. Says the Gemara, Nachman, the nichve, and if she's an epileptic, kimumin should be say dummy. An epileptic is considered discreet. Mummy, why? We'll see in a minute. In other words, he could have hit it, even though she was an epileptic before. But it doesn't happen every minute of the day. It happens only when she has a seizure, and somehow she can hide it. So, some people, it seems, I don't know, that epilepsy.
Some epileptics you can sense when they're going to have a fit. They know when it's coming on.
Oh, okay. It's amazing. The same thing. Kvilas mommies, they have a warning, so so therefore they just excuse themselves and they go, well, yeah. But if, let's say, it just comes on without her any, without any warning, and Kimumi should be golden, there's no way that over the time that he met her, he wasn't aware of it, which is clear from here that either you have to get to know your kala a little bit before you get engaged, or he would have done his homework and people would know, because you can't hide something like this. Everybody knows somebody's epileptic. Okay, we'll stop here tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem. Have a good day, everybody.